Hi there. Welcome to the Sober Circle channel. Enjoy this speaker tape.
Holly. Good to be here. Before I forget, and I usually do, I want to thank the committee for traveling this far. It's been a nice weekend for me. I love AA anyway, and I particularly enjoy being invited and someone pay my expenses. I have always loved AA. I still do. I'm one of those people who've been coming to meetings 4, 5, 6 nights a week for the past 31 years. And I started to attend step meetings about 25 years ago, and in Worcester, Mass. And this was it was good for me because at that particular time I couldn't read and write. I was sober 5 years, and I had a lot of problems, and I didn't know what to do. And a friend of mine asked me to go to a new meeting in Worcester one night, and I walked into my first step meeting, and there they would read the first, I think 7 or 8 pages of the first step. And there I heard for the first time what our co-founder talked about when he said that these are the steps we took, which are suggested as a program of recovery. After they finish reading the steps, then you have people from different walks of life. They would start expressing their ideas, their insights, their beliefs as to what this particular step means to them. And when I heard that, I didn't understand what they were talking about. I didn't have any ideas of going back to meetings. But Paul, who asked me every once in a while to go to a meeting, and there I met a good friend of mine who's still a good friend today, Father Fred, who were new at the time. And I've been going there now for 25 years, and of course those of you who have been going to step meetings, you know that they teach you, they talk about how to live sober, and they talk about how to believe in God, they talk about how to identify different things in life, they talk about how to understand and how to accept, how to let go. So 25 years later, here I am, and I feel, well, when I look back in my own life, I realize that I look back with entirely a new vision. I have been taught to see things that I couldn't see in the early days. I have been taught to understand a lot of things about life that I just didn't understand. And I know something about trusting God and believing. So I feel that I am very lucky. I feel that I have been given a lot to be grateful for. I also see that there has been some very special people in my life, like God has put some very special people in my life, particularly in the early days when I really didn't know that what an alcoholic was. I didn't understand when they talk about that alcoholism was an illness. And my life in AA started one night. I was in a mission in Syracuse, New York, and I have been in skits for about 7 years. And I have been in mission many times because a fellow by the name of Tom, who run the mission, if you attend one of his religious services, he would always allow you to sleep in a dormitory with other bums. So I have attended many of Tom's religious services. I was there one night when a fellow walked in. He says to me, "I am a member of Alcoholics Anonymous." I said, "Good for you." I have never met one before. He said, I got sober in Salvation Army. I was told that maybe you needed help. I didn't know that. He asked me if I wanted to go to a meeting. I said, no, because I've already had a bed. And I think the real reason was that I didn't dress too well. I needed a haircut. I suffered from wine sores. And when I'm sober, my friend Butt said how sensitive we are, that we get hurt easily and we don't suffer well. But the fellow said, "In this meeting, John, they have coffee and donuts and they're free." So I said, "Why didn't you say so in the first place?" So I walked into my first meeting, and there was a fellow who stood at the door, a lawyer who's been sober 13 years, I've learned much later, and his job was to shake hands to people who were coming to that meeting. And of course, when he seen me, he grabbed my hand and he said that he was happy to see me. And I don't think that I was happy to see him at all. You know, and I sat down, and my first speaker in AA was Lady Judge. And she wanted me to identify. Here I am, I'm 28 years old. Been skipped for 7 years, and I have never been married and never owned a car, never had a driving license. I couldn't read and write. I'm sitting in an AA meeting, dirty, long hair. I'm living in a rescue mission. I'm supposed to pay 35 cents a night, and I'm behind 3 weeks' rent. I have financial problems, can you imagine me saying to myself, "Lady and I, we have a lot in common." I said to myself, as soon as I get my donuts, I'm getting the hell out of here. But we talk about special people, and I suppose they truly are. When I talk about a special person, I'm talking about a person I think who understands like I have been taught to understand. He knew, this man, that I could not identify with Lady Judge, this lawyer. I'm sure he knew that I was sick and that I needed help. And on my way out, he put his arms around me. He wanted me to meet some of his friends. And this is where my life in AA started. I met few people in AA, and I felt that they really were interested, they cared. I felt this feeling of it's all right to be there. And you know, it's funny because I never really felt that way. It's amazing all the years that I have listened to speakers. We all seem to feel that we don't quite fit in or something. And but I didn't know it was because I was an alcoholic. You know, I remember I went back to meeting, and I remember a fellow by the name of Harry J. who was a secretary in Central Group, and he would invite me to his home. Sometimes on Sundays, I met his wife Ellen and 2 daughters, and he lived in a nice home. Harry was an officer in the bank, and I heard him speak one night, and Harry talked about things that Bud talked about last night, the things that I have felt all my life, like he had fears, he said. You know, I have known fear all my life. He talked about being lonely. I know this guy. I have been to his house. Got a wife and 2 daughters, swimming pool. And someone said he was an officer in the bank. You talk about he never fit in. You know, and he's saying things, but I think that the only reason I feel this way, number 1, is because I'm an Indian, you know. Number 2 is that I cannot read and write, and I'm sleeping on the floor in the mission. You know, if I had a home, and if I had money, and if I had a nice car, if I had a nice girl or a bad girl. See, in my condition, I didn't care. You thought I was getting spiritual, didn't you? And I guess it did something to me, and I guess that's one among many things that is so priceless for an alcoholic, not necessarily because you're an Indian, you cannot read and write, because my problem was that I was a sick person, and I didn't know it. And I guess what he told me, or what it gave me, and what I felt that night was this feeling that I wasn't alone. Because that seems to be one of my special problems all my life. And you know, and I thank God for the recovery program, because I had no way of knowing 25 years ago that these people will teach me how to be here this weekend and feel good with other people, you know. And you know, I was brought up in a small little reservation in Quebec called Mariah, and I don't come from abused home. My father, I think he drank too much. He died when I was quite young, but my father sang in a church in this small reservation, and Sunday morning he would stand there, and he had a book in one hand and hold the railing with another hand because he needed to, and he was always sweating, and he would sing. And I used to be afraid that one day he would leave the railing go. But he never did. But they did get rid of him because, I don't know why. And then after my father died, we were a big family. My family took sick with TB, and we lost 8 members in my family within 5 years, including my twin brothers. And I was 13 years old when my mother was dying with TB. And when I talked about fears, and I suppose maybe it is only natural sometimes to be afraid, but I think to be afraid all your life, you know, and it's the way, you know, I remember waking my mother up early in the morning because I thought I was dying too. I thought that everybody was treating me like if I had TB. And my mother said, no, you're strong, and I'm proud of you. And when my mother died, I stayed in this old house all by myself with a dog. And I really, truly felt the same thing that Ari talked about in my own home. I really felt that nobody cared. I really felt that nobody loved me. And the hardest thing is I have never told anyone, and I never heard anyone talk about it until this man who works in the bank. When I was 28 years old, for the first time, I've heard someone exactly how I have always felt about myself. And I suppose to some extent maybe it is natural to feel some of the things I felt. But I left home when I was 14. And I suppose I am, like so many of us, I've always wanted to be somebody. All my life. I had a picture in my mind of being someone important. I will do great things. Never figured of sleeping in a sidewalk for 7 years. It wasn't my goal at all. I did what my people did. They worked in lumber camps in Maine. I arrived there and I asked if I could get a job in lumber camp. The fellow said that I was too young. But the Second World War took all the younger people, and they needed a dishwasher, and the fellow said that the camp is 20-some miles in the woods, 23 or 4 miles in the woods, and if you want to take a chance, it's up to you. I walked there, and I arrived in the lumber camp, and I met a man by the name of Bill Langster, who was in charge, and he kept me there for 4 years, washing dishes, and when I was 18, I left the lumber camp. I wanted to go back home to my reservation, but I thought it would have been nice if I could go back as a soldier. And so I went to Quebec City. And the reason I went to Quebec City because that was the closest to my home, and joined the Canadian Infantry. What I didn't know was that if you have no education, the Canadian Army doesn't allow you to go on training. So I wound up 3 years and a half washing more damn dishes. And that's something that really bothered me because you learn so many things about recovery, and among other things, the recovery says that when you don't believe in yourself, you always seek approval. You live on what people think or what you think they think, and you become a people pleaser because you have nothing to stand up for. And of course, I learned that many years later, but in the Army, washing dishes, I was ashamed of it. I told lies about it. I didn't go home. Because that's just the way I am. Things cripples my life. And I didn't drink. I didn't smoke. I chummed with the guy who was just like me. We always talk about someday we do great things. We never did anything. One time somebody told us that in the St. Lawrence Street in Montreal, if you have enough money, you can go over there and pick any girl you want. So we talk about that for a few months. And one day we'll do that. So one day we decided to go to St. Lawrence Street. And those of you who have ever been in Montreal, they're there. They're still there. I was there last year. I'm telling you, there's some pretty ones in there talk about spiritual awakening. And if you don't feel that way, somebody should shoot you. Anyway, we arrived there and we found him. And we stood there. And we stood there. And we stood there longer than most girls did. See, I didn't know I needed a drink. I said what the people would say if they find out I do these things. No spiritual experience that night. So we got a discharge together. We each bought a suit. We got all dressed up. He says, I know a place you and I can go. We'll have a few drinks. I've been there before, he said. And that was the Glory Cafe in Montreal. And you walk into third floor, and as you walk in, there's a three-piece or four-piece orchestra playing, and in front there's a girl singing, practically with no clothes on. And that's where I get my first awakening. And then I took a drink, and of course you've heard it last night, today, and God knows how many times about what happens when you and I drank. Happened to me. I've always had these things that we talk about, like being sensitive, that and I don't fit in. The secret I have about washing dishes in the Canadian Army, the secret of not being able to talk with English and not having an education and not being happy at all the way I was brought up. Disliking it. It's not something that drives you to suicide, but it's just something that's nagging you in life and cause you to wish if you were somebody else. And I know that I've been around AA long enough to have learned few things about myself. I realized that when I took a drink, alcohol, in a matter of a very short time, took away all of these things, and in a matter of 20 minutes. And I said many times, the first thing I loved about drinking, I can get very close to people, and among other things I've learned, and my wife tells me every once in a while that I am a very distant person, I am today, but I can't help it. You know, and I know that you pay some when you are distant in life. But when I drank, I can get very, very close to people. And I can still see how felt is good inside. I am not a hateful person. I don't think that I have hate anyone in my life. When I drank, I loved people. And in a matter of 15, 20 minutes, I guess, I could have grabbed any hand in there and felt good about it. But there are other things, too, that are a little crazy that I loved, like falling in love about 11 o'clock at night, looking at a girl with one eye because you can't see her with two, and telling her how beautiful she is, because that's what you can see. You see, alcohol also affects your vision. And telling all those beautiful things and how beautiful she is, and until the next morning you look at her, you say, holy Christ, you were so cute last night. You know, you can't wait to get drunk to fall in love all over again. But I'll tell you something, it's better than have this nagging feeling walking around thinking that you're not good enough. The other feeling that got me into a lot of trouble, every once in a while when I drank, I got this feeling that I can lick anybody. And that's a very dangerous feeling, you know. And it got me more trouble. I would go to Smitty's, and Smitty's It's where all the New York Indians drink. I'm a Micmac Indian. I don't drink in Smitty's normally because we don't communicate too well. And every once in a while, about 20 of us Micmacs, we go to Smitty's and we would communicate. But when I get this feeling, I would go there and I looked around and I would find me somebody that looked like I didn't like. And I would stare at him. Of course, he'd seen me, he got the message, and he doesn't want to be bothered. So I'll go over there and I'll tap his shoulder. And I tell him, I don't like you. And I hit him. And then they call the cops, and I would wait. And it's not because I hate anyone. It's just that sometimes I just like to prove to people who the hell you're dealing with. You know. I would wait. And by this time, they know me, so they'll bring about 3 cops. Then we'll fight. And next morning, I'm in the courtroom, and this officer, he brought his pants with him. I teared his pants. Judge said, John. Now he calls me John. You know, I've been there before, you see. What, John, he said, what happened? Well, I said, nothing. I said, all I want to do is put him down, but he's so fat, and I didn't know the judge was an alky, so he's laughing like hell. People in the court laughed, so I laughed too. Until I got 3 months, they were all still laughing when I left. And of course, it was all right. I was still a social drinker at the time, and I was still having fun. But it's, you know, alcoholism, it's one day, I don't know, sometimes it just no longer there is fun anymore. You don't want to fight anymore. You don't want to go to jail anymore. You don't want to get drunk. It's just that. I really wanted to stop drinking. I think we all do. And in my days, there were no treatment centers, and the bum would say to me every once in a while, John, you look sick. Why don't you take a pledge? And you know, when the bum tells you you look sick, you're sick. So I would see a priest, because that's where bums went, see a priest, and you take a pledge. And priest wanted me to go to confession, and I didn't know too much about those things, but you know, I had plenty to say. But the whole idea was that I think the message I got was that I maybe should try to be a nice person or a good person. And I would try. I had my own ideas. Maybe we all do, but when I live at home, my mother used to say to me, John, you don't swear because it's bad. I've learned that when I was a kid. So when I try to be good, I try not to swear. And my mother used to say that, you know, you don't criticize, you don't talk about people, and you don't tell lies. It's not honorable. And I understood that. And I understood today. So I try that. And I don't know, some ways I've learned that you shouldn't go to bed with women. I tried that. It never helped me, but I tried it. But I didn't know that I was a sick person. What happens is that the way I felt, nothing changed. And you see, it's not that the way I felt. You know, you learn in AA, it's not so much that you have to change the way you feel, but you have to find space to grow from who you are. You see? But you see, the thing with me is I've always wanted to get away from who I was. Get away from myself. escape from myself. I didn't like myself. You know, so I would walk in the streets. And I'm lonely, like Harry says. And I don't know how to be lonely. I felt I don't fit in, and I don't know how not to fit in. I felt scared, and I don't know how to act when I'm scared. I felt that because I was an Indian, I didn't want to be one. I knew something up here. If I take a drink, I knew that. And that's the way with me. I remember Major Harvey, first arrived in Salvation Army. I never forgotten. He brought me to his office and said, "John, you're 20 years old. You're 22 years old." He says, "You go and join these people, 75 of them upstairs. They're all burned out, John. They've been through every Salvation Army." He said, "We got all these records." He said, "You're too young. Don't be like one of them." See, Major Harvey didn't know that it's not a question of choice. I had no choice. You know, as a matter of fact, the only time I felt comfortable was when I joined these 75 bums. At least there was something there. And 7 years later, when I walked into Salvation Army, Major Harvey just shook his head and wouldn't say one word. Because time and time and time and again, I arrived there after 2 months living in the streets, dirty, long hair, wine sores. Major Harvey knew. 3 weeks later, a month later, I will go back. I was just like one of them. You see, I didn't know. Then I take a drink. So what I took a drink is that, you know, pledge don't work. I get the feeling that I'm no damn good. Tom will run the mission. He's really a nice guy. He said to me one time, "John, there's a fellow by the name of Billy Graham coming to this city. This man helps a lot of people. You go and listen to him." And I did for a couple of weeks, and I got sober, but he left. You know, and I got drunk. I was in the mission one night, wanting to get to bed, attending a religious services, and the fellow get up. He said that he was a bum just like us for years. He said, "One night I have accepted Christ as my personal Savior right in this mission. I haven't drank since then," he said. He said, "I got married. I have bought a new station wagon. I have a home, and I work nights." And then he says, "Any of you bums can do the same thing. All you have to do is move forward." So I moved forward. I knew nothing about Christ. I told you I spent 4 years in lumber camp, and I used to listen to lumberjacks talking about him. And you know, by the time they finished with him, you wouldn't believe him either. You know, but I moved forward. I've always wanted a new station wagon, and this guy kneeled next to me. He said that I was saved, and next morning I'm facing a judge. Judge Dorsey said that the Fayette Park here in the city is for the decent people to go there on Sundays, not for people like you. Then I'm sent to Jimmyville for being vacancy or not having a room. And so when I was asked to come to Alcoholics Anonymous, I really didn't know, and I would have never believed that this day was, for this Indian, was a very important day. You know? I came back to meetings, and I met my sponsor, Pat. I never liked Pat. I knew Pat. Pat lived in Skids. I met him in Skids. But he was an Irishman from an island with a degree. I used to say there's nothing worse than a bum with a degree. And he walks in one night in Central Group. He says to me, "John, I'm your sponsor." I didn't even ask. He had a girl with him, and he said, "I have a new car outside." And he would pick me up in the mission every night, and he would bring me to a meeting. And sometimes he would be late, and I get so mad. I didn't know that I was a perfectionist. I mean, if you see me laying in the sidewalk with long hair, wine sores, and dirty, you wouldn't say, now this man, he's a perfectionist. You know? But to teach Pat lesson, I wouldn't go with him. Pat used to say, John, you can't stay sober and live with those bums. He believed that. I didn't. I felt comfortable there. But I think God was on his side because one night mission burned down. And Pat said that was the grace of God. And next day he brought me 12-step house. I worked there for a year. I get thrown out of there. I get into a fight with a... Well, they used to play cards all night, and someone called one night looking for help. This lady, she was drunk, and when they find out who it was, they told me she's been around for years, and that's all she does is use people in AA. But I'm a great believer that I still do. You know, I got a lot of things in life, and I wouldn't have none of these things if someone didn't come to see me one night in a mission, you know. So I knew that they were wrong. But I never know what to do when I'm right or wrong. I did what I felt I should do. I upset the table while they're playing cards, and I punched this guy, and I never liked the bastard anyway. You know, knocked him down on his ass. I could have started my own group. But they throw me out, and 3 o'clock or 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm walking down Fayette Street. My sponsor picked me up, brought me to his home, and next morning he brought me to Salvation Army, where I was there about 3 years or so. And in my 5th year sobriety, I was living in Salvation Army. I had a pat in my pocket telling me I could come home at 11 o'clock. I'll tell you something, I was lonely, because all that newness wear off. You know, like making friends was so good at first, even understanding a lady judge. You know, at first I never understood what she was talking about. She used to say that it's a mental obsession that precedes the first drink, and once you take a drink, now it's coupled with a physical compulsion. But appreciate that. I used to say, holy Christ. Someday I would like to have her disease or something. But she also talked about waking up in wall-to-wall carpet and not remembering how she got there. She said that she used to get so sick that she would crawl to a John. And when she arrived there, she never used the John the way it was designed. She said, I stick my head in there, like if I was looking for serial number or something. You know? And one day a thought comes to my mind that sometimes I wake up in sidewalk, and I don't remember how I got there either. And I crawl to a dirty old sidewalk. Then comes to my mind, what the hell is the difference where you wake up when you don't remember? What is the difference? What about crawling? What is the difference when you crawl to wall carpet or crawl in the dirty old sidewalk? I mean, crawling is crawling. I mean, what about puking? I mean, I don't want to spoil your dinner, but puking is puking. You can very well say mine tastes better than yours. So you learn to identify. But you see, having friends that love you, the idea that you can identify, the idea that you feel good where you are is not recovery. And sooner or later, unless you have recovery, it's going to come back. And the beautiful thing about believing, see, the difference is, if you believe, you can live what you couldn't live before. That's why the second step starts by saying, come to believe that there is a power greater than yourself. Learn to trust. This is where the sobriety stays. Because you see, I was lonely. I arrived in Marlborough, Mass. 1 o'clock in the morning. I was broke. I didn't know where I was. I looked in a Main Street, and there is a hotel. I could tell there's a flop house. I can see the flop house when I see one. I went upstairs, and I slept in the men's room. And I was lonely. I was scared. I was lost. Because you just cannot be in a men's room, some strange town, and lay there and say, Jesus, am I grateful to be sober? You know? Gratitude is something you have to learn. But I look back now, and it's like a good Lord would lead me along in life, and that's where I met Paul. Wonder restaurant. And he brought me to my first step meeting, and I would go back, and then I met Father Fred. Father Fred said to me, John, I'm going to institutions, and would you like to come with me? I said, sure, but I said, you know, I don't speak because I don't have an education, and I don't talk good English. Oh, he said, don't worry about it. And when a priest says, don't worry about it, you don't worry about it, because that's supposed to tell the truth. But not in AA. You know. So we go to different institutions, and among the institutions we go to was Walpole Prison. That's Saturday at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you have about 150 people. And Father Fred would stand there, and he would talk to these people, and I felt good just to be in there. But one day, we were there, and Father Fred says to them, I brought a speaker with me. So I take a quick look around, you know, and I knew I was trapped, you know. What am I going to say with, you know, I have never done anything like that. You know, the best I ever done was to tear this cop's pants. And even in the courtroom, they were laughing. Now, you don't tell that to these are killers. I mean, they kill people. They don't tear pants, they'll kill. You know? And they're not trying to impress anyone either. And they rape. And they steal. And they have pride. I mean, their own anyway. And I stand there, holy God, I don't know what I said, but Father Fred, on our way home, I said to him, you're not supposed to ask me to speak. He said, I tell lies. That's when I stopped trusting him. But Father Fred and I have been friends for 25 years. He's now 78 years old. And it's been one of my special people in life. Because there's a lot of things I never understood, and I got to know Father Fred, and we traveled a lot for a good many years, and I would ask, like, well, I go to a meeting, and they were talking about being restored to sanity. And like I told you, I'm a very sensitive person. I get hurt easily, and I don't suffer well. When someone said that I should be restored, I disliked it. I don't even want to know what the hell it means. I just meant that you shouldn't talk to me like that. You know? So I asked Father Fred one day, what do you think about this business of being restored? He said, that's not what the book says. You know, he thinks he knows so much. You know? And he's so anxious to tell you.
So I said, what it means. He said, the book says that you come to believe. I said, I tried that. That never worked. He said, you try what? I said, this business of God. I said, I even went to confession. I listened to Billy Graham. I even accepted Christ as my personal Savior. That stuff don't work for me. You see, what I didn't know was, I was sober 5 years. And I just by asking God in the morning and thank Him at night. See, I didn't know that it's in believing more so than how you feel. You see, the thing is, it's in believing that will allow you to stay sober no matter what you feel. I mean, you can face anything in life if you believe. But little can you face if you don't. That's what Father Fred was saying to me. I said to him, how do you do that? Well, he said, the book says, just have an open mind. He said, he says that every time they read it. You know, and you know, he digs me, you know. He knows he hurts me. And then he says, open mind, all there is to be teachable. And then he says to me, not going back to step meetings because you don't like what people say. It's not being teachable. You're still looking for what you want. And that's why you don't change. You know? But you know, I was sober 5 years, and I respected Father Fred. I liked Father Fred. And I believed him. And I knew saying it's true. And then he says to me, John, whether you like it or not, someday you have to start from where you are with what you have. And on my way home on the bus that night, 16 miles, first time in my life, I said this to myself, John, you're 33 years old. You're still hanging around in that men's room. You cannot read and write. You don't have money. I go to Paul's in the morning to get breakfast, to do little work. You don't have a girl. Father Fred said, you have to start here. You know? What is the difference? The difference is when I left Thursday morning, I left the 14-room house. I have 2 little cars sitting there in the truck. You know, I live like a white man, dollar down. And yes, there is a difference. The difference was, you know, once you start to become teachable, then you start hear things that you'd never hear before. Like third step says, God don't make a decision, you do. All at once, hey, you know, I have this gift that I can choose. Maybe the things I dreamed about when I slept between 2 mattresses with a dog at the age of 13. Maybe I still want those things. I would love to say one day that I'm important. I would love to believe that one day. I would love one day to have a new car. I never dreamed to have 2 of them. But just a new car. I would love that. See, I walk in the street and think about those things. Because just the only thing that make me feel good. I would love to have a nice girl one day, not anyone that you can get, but the one that you really like. And that makes so much difference. You know, I love to sit down one day with that checkbook and sign my name. You know, and I didn't realize. I had no way of knowing. When I met Father Fred, if I become teachable, these things will come true. Those promises that Bud was talking about. He says they will materialize too, that I will know peace, inside, that I will not be ashamed anymore, that I belong in life. You know, when you walk 33 years and you don't even know what that is, it looks to me and it feels like it's so far away from where you are. I went to the restaurant next morning like I always do. Paul says to me, Rita, who was a waitress, she asked me if you can paint her house. I said, sure. He said, go over and see her. I went in there and she said, I want you to give me an estimate. This big house is an undertaker place now. This is how big it is. I walked around 3 times. I walked in there and I said, Rita, it'll cost you $300. Just because you try doesn't mean you're not stupid. And she gave me a job right away because other contractors wanted $1,200 to $1,400. I said to Paul, I got a job, but I don't have any money. He said, go back and ask Rita. She gave me $100. I got me a little room that I paid $7 a week with a little kitchenette. And I went and I bought some paint and coveralls. I figured if you're going to be a president in your own company, you should have white coveralls. And I went to a meeting and I met this man. He comes to me and he said, John, I'm told you're looking for a ladder. I said, I am. He said, I work for a telephone company. I will deliver you a ladder Monday morning, but don't tell anyone, it's against the rules. This damn thing is yellow. You can see it miles away. You know. It was sick as I was. But I finished painting a house, and I owed Paul $65. And I was at the meeting one night, and I met this man who was a plumber. He said, John, I'm told you're painting houses. I said, I do. He said, I have a little ranch out 7 miles from here, and all you need is a little step ladder. So I bought a step ladder, and I got all my drop cloths together, and I stood in the corner, and I stopped the bus. And this guy, he stopped, and he looks at me, he looks at my ladder, and he said, you're not serious. I said, I am. I'm self-employed. And he says to me, if I give you a ride, would you promise you'll never do it again? My next house was the school teacher who taught school for 40 years. And Paul says to me, why don't you ask her? It's only 69 questions to get your driving license. So I said to her one day that, I had to tell her that I couldn't read and write. I wanted her to help me to memorize the 69 questions. I asked her if she could help me. She said, I have taught thousands of people. And a couple of months later, I knew the questions inside out. And I went in Marlborough, Mass., and they put me in this little room. And this guy asked me, I think, only 2 questions. I mean, I was depressed. I mean, this is 2 months' work. I said to myself, what in the hell's used to have an education? Nobody cares. But I got my driving license, and Paul came to see me with this big black station wagon. I used to call it 11 passengers because I used to bring 11 people to a meeting. John, he said, for $750, it's yours. Well, I didn't have $750, but the lady who belonged to the Saturday night meeting, she says to me, John, if you can get $250, I will co-sign for you. And so I borrowed the $250. She co-signed for me, and here I was in my 5th year sobriety. I was president in my own company. I had a driving license and 11 passenger station wagons. And I decided I should find me a girlfriend. And the only thing wrong is I had both front teeth was missing, and I lost those while I was communicating with New York Indians. One of those days when I felt I could lick anybody. Someone said that there was a new dentist in AA, and I've learned that new people are very anxious to help you. So I found him, and I cornered him one night, and I said to him, I have a little problem. He says, what's the problem? I said, I'm looking for a girlfriend, but I have these 4 teeth missing. So he gave me his card, and 2 months later, he gave me a new set of teeth, the top ones. I have just had bottom ones pulled a couple of this one I pulled a couple of months ago. That's why I don't talk with Englishmen. Here I am, I got a new set of teeth, and I went to a meeting and I met this lady. She says to me, John, I'm told you have a car. I said, 11 passengers. She says, I run a home of alcoholic women. I have 9 girls. I'm looking for someone to bring these girls to a meeting. Would you like the job? I said, I'll be very happy to. That's where I met my wife, Kathy. On our way home, I said to her, would you like to go out on date? And she said, no. I mean, she didn't even think. And if you're sensitive, that's a total rejection. That's treating you like nothing. And I don't like to be rejected. I get hurt easily, and I don't suffer well. And on my way home, I said to myself, who in the hell she thinks she is? If she is living with those women, none of them have anything. And here I am, I have a new set of teeth. I drive a 11-passenger station wagon. I'm a president in my own company. Who the hell wants her anyway? Next Thursday, I picked the girls again. On our way back, I said to her, would you like to go to a show in Boston Sunday? She said yes, and we did, and on our way back, I asked her to marry me. She said, I don't even know you. Well, I said, we have a few miles to go, we'll get acquainted. And 3 months later, we got married. I only had $85. She had nothing. We rented a 3-room apartment that was empty. There was nothing there, and we walked in, just the coffee table. The man who ran the Fate House used to make a furniture at one time, so he made a coffee table for us, and I was our present. Nobody showed up in our wedding. There was only 6 of us. Because people just don't believe you should marry that way, you know? You should organize it. Go out for a year to get to know each other, you know, and buy your furniture and save money. Anyway, we got into this apartment. My wife says to me, where are we going to sleep? I said, we'll sleep on the floor. What the hell, I've been around long enough to know you can have fun on the floor. I'm sick, not stupid. I mentioned that one time in New York, and after the meeting, this lady comes to me. He says, young man, I don't know how much fun you can have on the floor, she said. But I know, she said, you can have a lot of fun in the Oriental rug. I said, thank God you identified. But while we're laying on the floor, I said to Kathy, you know, I'm the only one in the family, and of course I would like to have someone carry my name, you know, and I would like to have a boy. And then I said to her, you know, if you give me a boy, I'll buy you a diamond. You got to be sick, you know. You're laying on the floor, promising. But the beautiful thing was, my wife's sick enough, so she believed me, and that's always important. Next Christmas, she was in the hospital waiting for a boy. I walked into a bank. I wanted $200. I've never been in a bank before. The fellow says to me, "What do you got for collateral?" I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. You know, I've been going to meetings almost 6 years, and I have never heard a speaker get up and talk about collateral. Just so you're doing good, they hit you with something else. You know, it's never ending. I went 3 banks, and they asked me if I had a collateral. So I said, I'll go and see Paul. He has a degree. He'll know what collateral is. You know, so I walked into a restaurant, and I said to Paul, what's collateral? Well, he said, John, you have nothing to worry about. That makes you feel good, you know. I said, why? He said, you don't have any. I said, what can I do, Paul? He said, you can pray. I said, Christ, Paul, they don't need God, they need collateral, you know. So I went to Hudson, which is 7 miles from where I lived, and I walked into this bank, and the girl says, see that guy over there was an old man sitting there retiring that year. So I told him the story about Kathy and I. We got married. I promised her a diamond. She's in the hospital and waiting for a boy. And she said, well, he says, you know, we can't lend money with sad stories, he said. And then he says to me, well, how much do you want anyway? And it sounded so good. You know, I've been in skits long enough to know I had him. You know, I said $400, you know. And he gave me $400, and I walked into Allen Jewelry store, and I said to him, show me the best diamond that you have, and he did. I said, show me the cheapest one. He showed me one for $150. I said, I'll take it. He said, you want to charge it, of course. I said, of course. And I brought it to my wife the next day, and she calls me up one night, and she said, honey, it's a girl. I said, you got to be kidding. And she said, no. And she wasn't. So next Christmas came along, and she was in there again, called me up. She said, honey, it's a girl. I said, well, don't worry about it. Just have an open mind. So next Christmas came along. She was in there again, calling me up. She said, honey, it's twin boys. So you know what I say? If you work hard enough, God will give you what you want. So I said to Kathy, what you say that next Christmas we hang our stockings, and 2 years later, the girl came along, and 2 years later, a boy came along. So Kathy and I, we now have 6 children, and been married 26 years. And of course, our kids are all grown up. We have one daughter who is a member of AA, and the only one who has a problem. But this is the story of AA, and is the story for especially if you like me sitting there tonight. Maybe you really don't have too much education, and maybe you feel that you're different. We all have reasons why we feel that way. Maybe you're scared. And maybe you feel you're never going to make it. And maybe you even feel that it's not really your fault. After all, you listened to, in the past few years, you listened to the kids get up and they talk about coming from a dysfunctional home. I listened to them, and I know that the only reason they come from a dysfunctional home because they were in it. You know? I know it's not easy when you're sitting there and listen to these people telling you, John, you know, you're like a tornado. Look behind you. You're a destruction where you've been. Sitting there and someone tells you, you know, you told lies, you cheated, you made excuses, that you rationalize, you justify. You spend years and years and years developing what he calls layers of self-justification. Your problem is not because you're an Indian. That's what Bill Wilson is saying. Your problem is because you don't have an education. John, your problem is that you believe nothing. You're not teachable. You see? But you know, how long does it take for one individual to come to that point where he says, yeah, I can be somebody, but I have to follow some direction. I can be somebody. I can sit down one day and write all my bills and still have a few $1,000s left. You know? My wife and I, we just come back from Florida. I would love to, maybe I should tell you that in my business, people used to say, John, can you cut a pair of steps? So I take them off and I use them I copy them. Someone said, can you raise the porch? 12 years later, I have learned enough of carpentry. I have learned enough of building codes. I took a test and I got a license as a general contractor with no restrictions. You see, there's nothing wrong in my mind if only I allow people to teach me something. You see? And so now I'm a contractor. I let other people carry my ladders. I even got a dishwasher. I just pressed the button, it hums. I said, hum, you cheap bastard. So I have 2 daughters married. I have we got a granddaughter and grandson. I got twins who are just coming home from Germany. He's been there, school, learning languages. I have a young daughter who's in a university. My youngest son just coming home this weekend from a National Guard. And my other twin went to school to learn something about my business. And so this is my family. This is me. This is the man who walked in one night from mission. You know, and of all people who touched me, who was a lawyer. You see, because he understood and he cared. You know, and the second person was my sponsor, Pat, who picked me up every night, used to bring me half a sandwich. See, it meant nothing to me. It took years later when I said to myself, anybody who stops and buy a sandwich to a bum in a mission, he really cares for that person. You see, you learn about how to live, and how to live is learning to understand, learning to accept, learning to console, learning to let go, learning to care about another person. These are the principles of learning how to live. Let go, let God. You see? And I know nothing about them. My sponsor passed. Dead now. Passed. And then Paul, who brought me to my first step meeting, who brought my first car. You know, it's 11th Avenue. Father Fred. The lady who co-signed for me, Father Fred, forced me to stand up in front of convicts. Who would ever believe 25 years later I would be invited here on Saturday night and talking to people who have degrees. a surgeon. And I would feel proud and grateful about it instead of being scared and think that I'm not good enough. There is a message here, and message is not me. Message is my story. And my story is possible only there were people here who cared. There's no sense trying to kid myself. That is the real truth. You know, people cared. God has put some very special people in my life. And of course, the last person who is very special in my life is my wife, Kathy. You know, my wife, Kathy, like me, she had no education. Thank God she could stay home all those years and raise kids, my kids. Only one of my kids smoked. And I'm really happy about that because I'm a nut. I know cigarettes are no good. Now, whether you like it or not, it's true. It hurts your body. And if you can get rid of them, get rid of them. I say that to my kids. Don't get into them. Listen to that doctor when he gets there. Those things will kill you. And they do. And I feel good about that. You know. But Kathy, when kids were growing up, she wanted to go to work. She had no trade. She goes to nursing homes and all of that. She finally went to school and get her high school equivalency. Now she works 4 days a week. And the reason she works 4 days a week so we can travel on the weekends. And so next year, hopefully, I might retire. I'm planning on going back to my home, bought a home there, only for the summer. I hate winter. I'm planning on getting another one in Florida for the winter. And I hope that I live long enough. I'm the one person I don't like to die because I enjoy my life so much. And sometimes, I don't know, sometimes when I'm up here and feel so important and feel I've done so much, I just wish that my mother could see it. And maybe because there is something inside of us that tells us, wouldn't it be nice if they know that we've done well? Maybe there is this of acceptance, or maybe because, you know, when I was a kid, my mother would wake me up 6 o'clock in the morning and say, John, we need wood in Gaspé. And I would take a dog and go in the woods and I cut wood all day. Then he'd write me a note. John, we need food. Bring this note to an agent. Get food.
And laying that night and crying so much because of hunger and because of sickness. And my mother, she never drank, she never swore. When she was dying at 8 o'clock in the morning, she says to me, go and bring Abraham. Abraham was the man who took my father's place in the church. And 8 o'clock in the morning, I went and get him, and he says he wanted him to sing a hymn that my father used to sing. And I'm deadly scared. You see, I have so much fear of death. And I'm watching a person who's dying that I cannot understand. I just cannot understand anyone could face life like this. And maybe that reason sometimes I wish if she only knew that day come that I could do that now. I don't know. I don't have those fears anymore. I have this feeling inside that I'm proud. I have this feeling that people honor my opinion. I have this feeling that I belong in life. I have that feeling that life is so good. And sometimes people need me. Like the man I sponsor who is a minister. Calls me up, he said, John, talk to me about 11 steps. I says, you haven't got the second step yet. The other guy is a scientist. He's got a degree in science. He travels all over the world. I'm his sponsor. I'm listening to him. I told him the other day when I talk, I'm going to tell him, you're the mixed up bastard I have ever met in my life. But sitting in Friendlies, a guy with a PhD asking questions about life. You know, you have that very special feeling inside, boy, that God is good. But so is the people. Thank you very much.